Hey, thank you very much. This is indeed a panel of heavyweights. I feel so academically uh, not inferior. I would say I'm with some peers maybe. Just kidding, just kidding. It's getting late in the afternoon and I'm getting a little thirsty. But anyway, Fred, thank you for the it felt like a VC 101, which really sets a lot of context to what I know will be a very fruitful discussion on this very important topic of raising money for your online business. And we have with this panel at least a couple of decades of experience in both incubation and raising funds, the hard way, and hopefully there are easier ways, and maybe we can disprove one of the points that Fred said, that it is harder here in the Philippines. Maybe it is not that hard, but we'll see where we are in the next 45 minutes. So maybe we can start with Earl. I mean, Earl, you've been doing, you've been looking for promising startups and businesses to infuse money in for how long now? About a year and a half?
So IdeaSpace was created actually March last year, and we launched our competition in September. So it's almost our anniversary actually when we incorporated the foundation.
So any off-the-cuff comments on some of the experiences that Fred has relayed from his 4 or 5 years here in the Philippines, raising funds and setting up startups.
Yeah, so actually it's quite true, no? It's not as easy to get actually the funding in the Philippines, especially in the early stage. Particularly that's why we created, for example, our foundation, because what we realized is that even to get a bank loan of 500,000 pesos, they ask you for collateral, right? So unless you already have a thriving business or someone can actually vouch for you, no? There's even a kind of a loophole where they said, you know what, the entrepreneur doesn't need capital, but then his dad or his uncle has to put in the collateral, right? So we said, how do we then debunk that? So we raised actually national competitions with more democratic or meritocracy. But it's actually good. So we got leading indicators that there's a lot of entrepreneurs or technopreneurs in the Philippines. So we closed our competition last month. We got 700 teams from all over the Philippines to apply for 10 spots. So statistically, it's difficult because even to get into an incubator like IdeaSpace, it's 1.5%, right? Just to give perspective, Harvard is 6% and UP is 18, right? So it's not as easy, but it doesn't mean that people didn't try. So I think in general, we have to figure out a way how to give funding and capital to more and more people, right? So hopefully, if in different companies that you're part of, they would then risk capital. Honestly, this whole 500 million might go to waste, right? Or it might not get any returns. But the people who can absorb the risk should at least try, right? Because we need this as a community, right?
Well, thank you for the input. It's certainly very different now as a business environment compared to a decade ago. I myself was trying to incubate some companies when I was with the Ayala Group, but it looks, it's a refreshing change to see some bullishness about the Philippines, and maybe I can ask Isaac, who seems to be really bullish about good old PH on his thoughts after 6 months of seeking the right investee companies.
Very bullish on the Philippines, which is why I keep coming back here. Plus, I get to hang out with Jack. Well, let's see. So first, I'll just maybe introduce Pollenizer because we're a slightly different type of investor. We do put money in at the very early stage, the idea stage, but we also work to build the business. So we're really like a company that builds companies. So we provide capital. Usually we match with some co-investor, and then we provide a team and a structure to build out that company, try to give it 1 year of runway, and then see if we can raise follow-on funds. We've done it in Australia for about 12 or 15 companies doing that model, and some previous ones with other models. So we have a lot of experience doing it. And then we've opened an office in Singapore, and really Singapore is the operational place, but we're looking for access to these markets: Philippines, Indonesia, Thailand, fast-growing Southeast Asia markets. And when I think about, I spend more time looking at deals and opportunities in Singapore just because that's where I'm based. And there's some good things about the Singapore market. There is access to capital. It's an easy place to do business and fairly transparent. But if you think about what's happening there, it's a little bit oversubscribed at this point. I mean, there's a lot of early stage money. There's a lot of people have gotten involved. And if you compare that to the market opportunity in Singapore, unless you're doing a B2B play where you can sell it to the MNCs or the SMEs or the corporations, but if you're doing a consumer play, there's not that many people in Singapore. I mean, they do have high per capita GDP, but there's not that many people. And Singapore is a market that doesn't look that much like any other market. So if you ask someone with their successful Singapore business, and I got 25,000 downloads or whatever, and you say, where are you going to go with it? And they say, oh, well, Hong Kong and Taiwan. But that's it. I mean, there's no other markets in all of Asia that look similar, and that's pretty limited. Whereas you come to the Philippines, I mean, it's not as easy a place to do business. It's not as advanced, all the infrastructure that a company would want. I mean, we're talking about e-commerce, and you can hear logistics is a challenge, and credit card penetration. Yeah, it's harder, but on the flip side, there's 100 million people. There's really fast growth. So there's a ton of opportunity here, so it's a great place. And the whole presentation was awesome, the VC 101 thing. But the really awesome part about that presentation was the last slide. Like, step up to the line and do it, because it really is the time. There is a lot of early stage money that wasn't there even 1 or 2 years ago. There's Smart, there's Globe, there's business angels, there's people like us coming from the outside. And what we're looking for, everyone has a different model, but just people who are going after it, who show that they have a little bit of traction or some capacity to make something happen, because there's such a big opportunity that even if you've done a little bit, someone may take a chance on you. So yeah, it's a great time to be doing investing, and I think on the flip side, a great time for people who have an idea to kind of chase it down and go for it.
That's a very good and bullish insight. So thanks, Isaac. Now let's move on to Ron. Ron has not been in the Philippines for very long, but certainly a very fresh perspective. Can you tell us a little bit about why you're here in Manila, Ron?
Sure. So,
are you a bull or are you a bear?
I'm definitely a bull, or I would not be here. Can everybody hear me? Or okay. I think this microphone is off. One. Okay, better. Yeah, so through the fund that we started, Innovation Eandeavors, really one of the things that distinguishes us from other investment funds is that we don't really invest in ideas, we invest in people. We found time and time that ideas change, markets change. The thing that really prevails is strong entrepreneurs. And one of the things that I see after spending some time here in the Philippines is a lot of talent, a lot of passion, a lot of people that are committed to make this entrepreneurial leap. And that's what makes this market exciting for me.
Great. Speaking about talent, one of the reasons that I often hear about why there are not enough investor companies to look into is the lack of technical or engineering talent. Is there any validity to this statement? Earl, maybe you can start off.
Yeah, so actually, part of my job is to go all over the Philippines and actually talk to, both the IT organizations at the same time, the students itself, right? So honestly, we have tons. We have thousands and thousands of graduates in engineering and IT, right? So I think what they need, though, is exposure, for example, to businesses like you. So honestly, I mean, maybe even at a global standard, we have to say, some are there, but then at the same time, we need to then prepare our engineers by actually taking them in and doing that 1 or 2 months to then do a boot camp inside your companies, right? So, but I think people who have the passion and the time and the hunger to actually create products and businesses for you are there, right? So, for example, some of the guys that I funded are, sons of fishermen and all these things, and they actually work triple hard, right? But you just need to give them a chance, right? So, you quiz them, not necessarily just on technical talent, but at the same time, the willingness to learn how to program in iOS, how to program in an Android, right? So those are the things that you have to think about, how to both train them and their willingness to actually do it, because they probably will do it.
So you found these individuals, and how old? Where did you find them, and how old are they? I mean, how young do they need to be for them to do a little catch up?
For example, one of the guys we support is 19 years old, right, from PUP. And then what we do actually is that we have these, you should go to some of these like hackathons because these we kind of what we call smoke out the developers, right? We give them opportunities to show how good they are technically, and you see them. So these are actually quite good recruiting opportunities for most of you to go to all these hackathons. Maybe at least once every 2 weeks there's one, right? So go to them, take a look at it, and it happens all over the Philippines, from Davao all the way up to Baguio. So, you know, there's definitely a lot of talent all over the country.
Ron, did you have anything to add to that?
I mean, I second Earl on that, and I think it's a self-feeding process. So as you fund this first generation of startups and they succeed, they become role models, more people are encouraged to take that same leap.
So I have an opinion on this. I think on the technical side, there's not a shortage at all. You have like major development shops in the Philippines doing contract work for local people, for U.S. companies. This is like a hot place to get engineers. They're not working on startups, or they're working on contract mostly, but there are a lot of great engineers. What there is not as much of, I've seen, is risk-oriented business people who have come up through the talent factories, the good universities, the MNCs, the telcos, the people who have worked their way up in the normal system and then are willing to jump out and do a startup. Okay, so in the U.S. and in the more mature ecosystems, it's possible to take that risk and to go out there, and your parents aren't going to look at you and say, "What? I sent you to this school, and you did this, and you did that, and now you're doing a startup." There's a lot more tolerance for risk taking and adventuring and even failing. But I think those same people and not just in the Philippines, but in other countries at a similar stage of development, it's very hard to pull those people out, and that's where startups are not just about making some amazing technology. In many cases, it's just building up a business model, often that's already been built somewhere else. Look at the most successful companies in this whole conference are group buying sites. There's no proprietary technology. They just took a business model that had worked in other countries and they applied. I mean, there's some proprietary technology, but not a lot. And so, but you need really strong business leaders. So I think that's the next stage of development. And if those people jump in and get cash into their businesses and get investors to invest in them, they can pull the technical people into the startups instead of working for the big development shops.
Yeah, actually, I was going to, Earl was asking me where did I get my engineer. And business like us, you don't need an army of engineers, it's true. I'm agree with what you say. I don't think the problem is only the engineer, it's more the leaving my comfort zone, the problem. Because what you said about the engineer, it's also true about middle management. It's also true about top manager. I mean, these guys are at Procter, Smart Globe, Coke, whatever. They are well paid. They are not really in a risky situation. And I would say their career plan is already quite established. It's very complicated to convince them to jump out of the line to try something else. If I see, for example, at CashCashPinoy, I mean, of course, when it's a new business, I give you an example, you want an e-CRM for e-commerce in Philippines, that doesn't exist. This profile doesn't exist. So you bring it from abroad, good luck, and it's expensive, or you found someone here who have the skill, who have part of the knowledge, and you train him. But I would say even this type of profile, it's complicated to tell them, okay, buddy, you're going to say bye-bye to your 300,000 for a globe, come to work for cheaper, you will discover what is a stock and this and that. It's a total shift. And I think it's also part of the reason why the ecosystem of investment is not complete, because it's very tricky to have the super sexy team who can also convince the investor to jump on. You have the feeling that it's only on your shoulder and you're not going very far when you're alone.
So the good news is the talent is available, both technical and management, but the challenge is really convincing them to take that leap of faith in joining, a risky quote-unquote startup. Would that be a fair conclusion?
It's exactly that, and I would say it's even worse because for me the risk is zero. I mean, the truth, if you are a big manager of Globe You try your luck in a startup, whoever it is, whatever is the startup. If it doesn't work, you're lucky because the lack of mid-management, you're sure to find a good job in any case. You will be able to go back because there is a lack of mid-management. So I would say the risk is even lower than in other market. But despite that, yeah, leaving the comfort zone is still tricky.
I'll say, I mean, maybe it's a slightly more optimistic view on that, but because I've hired before from top companies in the Valley, and even though it's much easier to persuade executives to leap into a startup, I wouldn't say that they have a different DNA or they're more risk-taking than executives in other countries or in the Philippines. I would say just they've had more examples of other people around them leaving companies to startups, succeeding or moving back to their company. So this is something that can fairly quickly change just by having 1, 2, 3 companies exit here and people seeing this example.
It's a virtuous cycle. For example, our CFO is coming from Ayala, and that was impossible 1 year and a half ago, but now it was okay to try something else. So you're right, it's a virtuous cycle, but until you don't have these successful case studies, it's really an hard job to convince them.
So let's talk about, we have some of the pieces that are necessary here. Some of the seeds are here to create this more investor-friendly environment. But I think that there's still some pieces that are missing to get us to where, maybe even Indonesia is. I don't know. Have you guys had experience in Indonesia or other Southeast Asian markets? There seems to be more VC activity in that market, which is, obviously bigger, but it seems that, based on some of the discussions we've had here, I think we're a little bit advanced versus that market in terms of e-commerce. But yet, there seems to be more VC activity there. Rakuten went there, for example, another player. Why is there that mismatch? Anyone?
So, this is my personal take. Indonesia, Thailand, Vietnam, and the Philippines are in many ways quite similar from a macro perspective when you look at the investment opportunities, with one exception, one big exception, which is that Indonesia has 240 million people. So it's just bigger. And I think the Japanese money, which is largely the money that's been flowing in Indonesia, they're just making that type of macro assessment. It's not like they say, oh, Jakarta versus Manila or talent levels or whatever. They just say 240 million is bigger than 100 million, and we only have, we're going to dip our toe in the water somewhere, so let's dip our toe in the water in Indonesia because there's some opportunity. And I think, the difference between Indonesia and the Philippines is precisely that it's external venture capital. There is some internal, there's a couple of big corporates who have backed a couple of funds, but it's not a huge difference, the internal venture capital, but Japanese money and now some, US money and otherwise Russian money going into Indonesia. Philippines will be at a disadvantage to attract that external money because it doesn't have quite the, Indonesia is considered the crown jewel of Southeast Asia just on size. I don't think it's a problem at the seed investment level. I really don't. I think with Globe, with Smart, with Angels, with other funds coming in, there's going to be a lot of money, like Frederic said, 50K, 100K. It will be a problem for the follow-on for the Series A because there's not local investors, and so some people need to go fly to Japan or fly to the US to get them, or try to get your government interested in the way that the Singapore government has been, because Singapore had the same problem and basically the government made up the difference and is funding the follow-on round at the tune of about $50 million. So something has to happen to get that next round, and there is some competition in Southeast Asia to get it.
Yeah, I think that's actually a good perspective, right? So if you look at the spectrum of investments in the Philippines, actually before the early stage was non-existent, and now we're kind of building that, sub $100,000 rounds, which is quite a large amount in the Philippines. It's 5 million pesos, right? And then maybe there's 2 players that can do $500,000 and above, but that's the local ones, right? So you're kind of in a crunch. After you get the initial runway, what do you do if you want to scale? But more and more, there's another option. Are all these what you say? These guests, right? Guest VCs. So we hosted in our office, some Russian guys, some guys from San Francisco, and they're here, and they told us, IdeaSpace, can you look and tell the community we're here, and can you host us to do their pitches? And we're even willing to actually invest in the Philippine entity directly. Right, so there is opportunity now, and then more and more of that model is successful. I'm sure a lot of these local, conglomerates, a lot of local, rich families will then fund more venture funds internally to the Philippines. So, there's always access to capital. They might not just be Filipino, but there's always going to be, especially this year, because we've been in the radar internationally. Even my friends in London, in Hong Kong, in New York, they all ask me about the Philippines, because their bank or whatnot, investment bank, are all asking about what's happening in Southeast Asia. And the Philippines is one of the bright spots. So it's good for us. So honestly, guys, let's take advantage of this limelight. If we don't take advantage of this, we'll lose it, right? So let's make sure that these guys who bet on us will actually get their money back, or they'll have opportunities when they come to the Philippines, right? Because we have, I think, a 2 or 3 year window, or else we might lose it. That's my personal opinion.
I subscribe to that, Earl. I mean, I've been I guess in business for a couple of decades now, and I have never been in an environment where it is as bullish as this from the external perspective. So let's move on to talk about what are the pieces or blocks of e-commerce that are hot, and what are those specific categories that you guys are looking at specifically to invest in? I mean, obviously the deal sites are here. What will be that next wave?
Don't look at me. I don't have money. Me.
Yeah, I know you're raising money, Fred. That's why we included
but-
you in this panel.
But
I have a couple of thoughts. So this has been an amazing conference, by the way, to get a sense of the state of the industry and what the value chain looks like. And it's seems a pretty exciting time, because you had your deal sites basically build an e-commerce market, so now people, okay, I can buy stuff online, and that led to a bunch of service providers to fill out the value chain, so basically logistics and payments, and so that's the petri dish. And then there's the second wave is just starting. Some marketplaces, some vertical e-commerce, but just at its infancy still, right? So because the infrastructure sort of exists, but it's still dicey, right? Payments could improve, logistics could improve, all of that. So one opportunity is just to plug in and become a better part of that value chain, help out with payments, help out with warehousing, something like that, and make it function better. Or you can sit on top of it and become another marketplace, a vertical e-commerce site, right? Some little group of people who want to buy this type of product or that type of product. So you can go anywhere in it. You can be a storefront, or you can be a service provider, and it's ready for that opportunity, but it's not over at all. It's just starting. So I think I see kind of opportunities all through the value chain, and it just depends on what you're into. If you want to, launch a front-end store because you're that kind of person, then you should do it, versus, be a back-end and a service provider. And ultimately, I think it was said in the presentation, it's just not about the idea. It's about how well you execute. You could decide to sell this thing or do this type of service. It doesn't matter. The point is, do you do it really well? Do you assemble a good team? Do you run fast and make good partnerships? So there's opportunities all through the value chain.
Yeah, so for us, actually, we believe in one investment thesis, which is democratization. And I realized, though, that a lot of e-commerce is dependent on the penetration of the internet, right, which is 30-40%. So then how in your e-commerce platform can you then involve the 60 to 70% of the population? I think that's where I think the gold will really come from, right? Because all these CPGs, they make money also on the mass market. So that's when I think e-commerce. So that if I had to invest in an e-commerce platform, is how do you then invest the rest of the mass market in the Philippines to really realize the 100 million potential, right? Else will always just revolve around the 10 or 20 million that have access to regular broadband, right? So
Are you
that's-
looking at anything specific right now, Earl? I mean, you don't need to disclose the names, but any specific spaces that are particularly interesting?
That's really what I'm thinking of. Is there a potential blended model between the e-commerce site and then doing it with a 2G or 3G phone, right? Because that's, I think, how you tie the two together is where it is. I mean, right now maybe I have some proposals, but then I always quiz people on that, right? What is your mass market strategy? Because that's when I realized that you can get more and more people to get involved.
So I would look at areas where there's already pressure in the market. So if you look at the existing platforms like Souweine and Multiply, they're very generic, and see where the hot areas of activity are: real estate, trade, and then build verticalized sites around that. You can vastly improve both the user experience and I think the volume of activity.
So are you guys saying that you would look at companies without any, proprietary technology? I mean, even if it was just enabling e-commerce as a business?
I just want to, I don't know if you guys know this company, Redmart, is a company in Singapore. It's a grocery delivery company. Very, very hot company right now, raising some money, hot on AngelList. And you go and you buy some groceries and they deliver to your door. Not an old idea, by the way.
Remember Webvan?
Yeah, Webvan and all that. So it's come back around. The logistics is ready for it in Singapore. Their first product was on Magento. It's like an off-the-shelf e-commerce store that anybody could set up, and they're hacking it together. And only now that they've proven demand and gotten traction, they're going back and building a proprietary system that really supports their use cases, right? So you don't need proprietary technology. You need to identify a specific market, specific set of users, and get out in front of them. And then if there's some traction, you can go back and maybe start to build. But there's so many tools you can use to get out in front of users without, coding the next great e-commerce site. You can use Multiply. You can use other stuff that exists, and then maybe if you really see something, you could branch out. So that's my take. You don't need proprietary technology.
Yeah. Actually, I think it's really a question of context. If you go to North America or Europe, all the field of e-commerce, they are already fulfilled. I mean, of course, fortunately, there is still guy with new idea, but more or less Patrick is not here, but you have a website who sell yo-yo in US because there is a market for that, a website who only sell yo-yo. So I think from an entrepreneurship point of view, in Philippines, the point is a lot of the basic business of e-commerce are not fulfilled. There is a lot of business who already prove their profitability in a lot of territory who are not yet existing. That doesn't mean it's easy and it's plug and play. No, you still have to take in consideration what we talked many times, like the logistic issue, etc. But I'm just saying, this basic business idea, they are not yet, no one for the moment launched it. So there is also a lot of opportunity for business model who prove that they are successful anywhere else. If you are able to adapt it, you will find the traction.
So maybe another area that hasn't been discussed here so much, so we talk a lot about selling things in the Philippines, but there are actually a lot of unique resources here that can be sold out of the Philippines. One that comes immediately to mind is travel. So of the 50 billion that was spent online last year, 45 was in travel. There is plenty of destinations here, and there's, I think, one example that hasn't been brought up here called My Boracay Guide, of a company employing 70 employees here in the Philippines. So that's a huge opportunity for export.
So anyone have any thoughts on travel? I mean, we haven't talked about that at length, but you're absolutely right. 80-90% of e-commerce volume is travel and hotels, or flights and hotels.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say in general, like my observation of the Philippines is it's undervalued and undermarketed, and it's true for commerce and true for investment, and it's true for travel. I mean, not enough people know how great of a country this is.
Wow, I wish the Secretary for Tourism was here.
I just have two thoughts on travel. We see a lot of travel business pitches because a lot of people travel and then they experience this problem or that problem. And they say, wouldn't it be cool if you had this travel site? And the one thing that we see a lot is expectation to run successful businesses off of referral fees for like flights and hotels, and especially flights. And it's really hard to make money that way. So some like a lot of the things that harm the travel ideas is that like not a full sense of the value chain and how you make money in it. The other thing is I think it's the, you already said it, like flights and hotels, there's some pretty great services out there, but the last mile of travel information, which is basically local tours, experiences, and information where you get there, people have not solved it. They've not solved it in the Philippines. They've really not solved it around the world. So flights and hotels is functioning pretty well online, but local tours and experiences is not. It's a huge opportunity. I've seen some people taking a crack at it, but many more could. And I think probably, I don't know my Boracay guide, but I guess that's probably what it is. Yeah.
Fred, any experience on the
travel?
travel?
Yeah, I mean, these flash sales, I mean, all flash sales websites sell travel. So there is a good traction, definitely. Sometimes there is issue.
Is it local or foreign?
Actually, that's one of the issue. The problem is you don't buy a trip if you're not sure that you will be able to get it, and then you face the problem of the visa. So at the end of the day, there is 40 destinations that Filipino can go without any visa. So there is no issue on that. But on these 40 destinations, the problem is there is only, I would say, 10 or 12 where you can really find some affordable offers. I mean, Maldives, Filipino don't need visa, but it's 50, 55, 60,000, the all-in story. So you can see that definitely when it's local destination, like Palawan, Boracay, El Nido, I mean, all these destinations, yeah, it sells a lot. But from my perspective, the problem is the inventory. As soon as you try to sell something outside, the sale doesn't work very well because of this visa issue. When you sell affordable destination with no visa, it works well. If it's expensive, it doesn't, because people prefer to have their a la carte. They call the agency and they have a la carte. I think probably the local inventory is also an issue, because the problem is you don't have 50 hotel, I mean, you don't have 200 hotels in Boracay who are really affordable. You have also some strong player like Agoda, who is really strong also in terms of travel. We tried something in the past. We tried something called no visa get refunded, meaning you buy your trip and you have 30 days to get your visa. If you don't have your visa, we refund you. To be honest, it didn't perform super well, but I mean, travel online works everywhere. That's one of the strongest segments in e-commerce. So I don't see why it would not work here. The point is just to find the right way to do it. This visa story didn't work. It's probably something else, but personally I didn't find it yet.
You're referring to selling vouchers for these trips?
Selling trips, I mean, whatever it is. We are in the flash sales. Because as Isaac was saying, if it's just to book, they don't need you. We have hotels.com, Agoda, I forgot the big, Expedia, etc. So you don't arrive on this market, you already lost. So you have to propose something different. So in our case, it's the flash sales price. The problem is for that, would you buy something if you're not sure to be able to use it? So you face the visa issue. But I agree, there is probably a market there. The only thing is to find the right way to address it.
Okay, any questions from the floor on the topic of raising funds for your e-commerce company? There is a text-in question. Let me read it. It seems that the Philippine educational system is geared more towards developing an employee mindset rather than a risk-oriented entrepreneurship. How do you think that can be bridged or mitigated in this traditional corporate?
No, sorry, but it's not true at all. I mean, what we were saying is the comfort zone, which is different from the entrepreneurship mindset. I mean, coming from a foreigner here since 7 years, I mean, the entrepreneurship mindset is everywhere. I mean, you go to any village, the guy is going to open a sari-sari, or is going to put a table and put free computer and open a cyber cafe, or is going to get fish. I mean, I'm taking a provocative example, but it's just to show that the entrepreneurship mindset is everywhere. So I'm not agree with that. It's more leaving the comfort zone, the issue, than have the desire to open the own business.
Doesn't that have the same effect, Fred? You know, you leave your comfort zone. You can't really be an entrepreneur, right?
Yeah, but I'm just saying this is a general constatation, like you build generation of employee. No, it's not true. There is some top people who are at key position, and yeah, it's tricky to make them move, but as you were saying, it will happen. Now, if you're talking about the global generation, I think it's exactly the opposite. Personally, I think there is more entrepreneurship mindset in Philippines than in France.
In any case, entrepreneurship is something that's mostly learned by practice and not in school. And a great example in the US is you see a lot of people graduating out of GSB, Stanford, Harvard Business School, and then going straight into Y Combinator.
So I actually have some thoughts on that because I actually went all over also the Philippines. There is just one question that people ask. Can I tell my mom I work for that company? Right, that's really it. So if you ask an engineer and you say, I work for CashCashPinoy, right? And if the mom knows that, then usually they'll say, okay, go ahead. And honestly here, the parental and there's a big parental influence. So that's why more often than not, people say, I want to work for Smart or Globe, Procter & Gamble. But then, you know, all of these new brands, doesn't mean they're big companies, but they become now big brands that look very attractive, even for parents to have their kids go there. And that's hopefully the goal of everybody here who have their companies, right? Is how to make themselves the next big brand. I mean, for example, IdeaSpace, you know, that's why people wanted to apply because they want to tell their mom that they work for MVP. That's really it, right? A lot of times I ask them, why are you applying to us? Because I want to tell my mom I met MVP yesterday. Right? It's strange, but that's really, honestly, this is it, right? This is the cultural context that I realized. I mean, I came from the US. I realized that this is really strong, right? Is this parental consent in the Philippines?
So rather than it's not really the educational system, but rather this culture, I guess, of you know, still being sensitive to your parents' perception.
Yeah, but it doesn't mean that they have to be a large corporation, right? Because even small
Just any
corporations can look
recognized
big,
name.
right? Because look big.
So I think this is where, so there's a distinction here between a CashCashPinoy. I mean, not that I'm very familiar with the company, but you guys have raised money, you have traction. It's like a startup that's scaled. It might be a little bit more risky, but ultimately, like, it has the name recognition. You can say, look, check out their website. People are using it. I don't think that's the challenge. I'm not saying it's not hard for you guys to get talent, but you know, once you have a repeatable business model, you can get people to come in and join you because you've significantly de-risked it. But getting somebody to join a two-person company or to be an entrepreneur before there's any real de-risking, that's very hard. And I think that's where the Idea Labs, the name brand incubators, the programs, the branded experiences, because ultimately you're still doing a startup, but you also have some cover. You go, I'm doing a startup, but I'm part of I'm part of the Kickstart incubation program. I'm part of the Smart incubation program. You know, this is so for Pollenizer, the same thing. Like when we try to bring people into our companies, ultimately we're starting some high risk, you know, unlikely to succeed startup that, you know, nobody's ever heard of, but it's a Pollenizer company. So then you have some cover, and I can say you're not just joining this, you know, thing that's never been tried before. You're joining a family, a group with a brand, and that gives some people, I think, not just the cultural cover, but a psychological feeling of, you know, comfort that they have somebody to walk that journey with, have support, infrastructure, mentorship, or whatever. And that's one of these bridging, it's like a bridging technology, name brand incubators, to bring people along their journey from, you know, maybe a corporate manager job, and then maybe they can get involved at this stage and then ultimately be a founder on their own. So yeah, that's one of the ways to move people along the lines.
Now, sticking to, you know, the question and commentary on our educational system, I am aware that our curriculum has not really materially changed. Yet we live in a very different world today, a world where technology keeps changing every 6 or 12 months. So I go back to my earlier question on technical talent, and a bunch of are computer scientists. I still think that there's a bit of a gap between the skill sets that are and graduates of our schools versus maybe an India, where they're more technical oriented, or maybe they have vocational schools, as being more ripe for investor interest. Would you agree?
I think, I mean, you don't need 10,000 engineers. You need 50 or 100 to get the ecosystem started. And at least from what I've seen anecdotally over the last 2 weeks, spending time at hackathons, at meetups, there is top-notch talent here that I'll be very, very happy to hire for my companies in the Valley, in Israel, and in here. So.
Well, that's very encouraging to hear. And would you agree, Earl?
Yeah, so, honestly, people just need models and inspiration, right? So even the teachers, they're even asking us to go to school and talk to them. And as much as you guys think that it doesn't make a difference in people when you go to school, regardless of what company you're from, since most of your technology, it makes a difference in even the teacher, right? So for example, a real case study, we did a boot camp in one of the schools, top schools actually, and then it's an entrepreneur class. For the past 10 years of this program, it's always a food cart that wins their business plan competition. Always. 100% of the business plans are always food or retail, right? But then we did the boot camp, and then the professor said, I can't believe that these students actually had technology ideas. So it actually means that the teacher limits the students because they said, I don't understand technology. I cannot support you as a professor, right? And honestly, that's what's happening, right? So even if all of us go to all our alma maters and just say, you know what, I'm going to talk about what I do in an everyday basis, and the teachers are there and the students are there, you'll have more and more engineers that want to go to school, computer scientists, and people in business that want to do technology. That's really the story.
Great. So it looks like the raw material is there. We just need catalysts in place to bring these out. Great. Okay, we have a question. Our friend Cherry.
Here I go again. Cherry Miguel, COO, Chiquiba Marketing. I have a question to you guys there. I'm from Silicon Valley also. I grew up there half of my life. There's a lot of venture capitalists and then angel investors, right? How do I know that you're the real venture capitalist? Sometimes, the intellectual property, you ask a person and said, oh, this is what I do, this is what I sell, this is the e-commerce that I will put in. Maybe you're just getting their ideas, but you will actually do it yourself.
I'm sorry, the real venture capitalist is the one who does that or not?
That's why it's my question.
How do you know whether the person you're talking to is maybe going to steal your idea and screw you over?
That's correct, right?
I mean, I'm guessing this is not an issue so much specific to fundraising and venture capital, right? Like, how do you know the person sitting across from you in any business setting isn't trying to get over on
you? For example, right now, okay, there's not too much medical e-commerce back here in the Philippines, which is back home we have CPD codes, ICD-9 codes. If the medical biller doesn't know the heart attack or complex patient 99215 is the ICD code, the CPD code is this one. You know what I'm saying? I want to put that one here in the Philippines. So the doctor just go in their tablet and say, oh my God, I forgot what will I put to the HMO. So
I'm gonna write that down. No, but seriously, so to some degree, it's like anything. I mean, you try to work with people who feel trustworthy, but I think that there's two things about the way this side of it works that do protect you. One is it is a reputation game, right? So you're, like wherever you are in the investment continuum, early stage, mid, Series A, like ultimately you're looking for some kind of deal flow. And no matter how mature the ecosystem is, there are going to be other people who do what you do. Okay, there are going to be other people who fund at your level, who have a similar ability, connections, mentorship, whatever. And so why is somebody going to come to you versus somebody else? A lot of it is based on the reputation that you build up over time and the way you interact with people. So if you start grabbing people's ideas and taking advantage of entrepreneurs, the reputation risk is super high. And outside of your reputation, like, because your reputation translates to deal flow, and if you don't have deal flow, you don't have a business. So the venture capitalist has like a pretty intrinsic motivation to be straight up. That's one. Two, even a company like ours, which actually does, we're not like a traditional VC where we fund, we will actually build companies and we take our own ideas and go after them. But we're not going to do it on our own. Like, if you come and you say, because it's not like, oh, I had this idea, this would be cool, but you say, look, I spent 5 years in medical technology, I have these connections, I have this insight into the market based on what I've done, and I think this would be a good idea. The value is all in you and everything. So if I took the idea minus you and your connections and everything that you can do, how worth it is it? I mean, it's not that valuable anymore. So you're protected because you are the value, and people are looking to invest in an idea that's attached to a team or an individual. So, that said, I'm sure people get taken advantage of. So you just have to, try to be careful. But what we get sometimes is, oh yeah, I'd love to talk to you, but can you just sign an NDA about my idea? You may not get a lot of conversations that way. I mean, different people work differently. You won't get a lot of conversations from Pollenizer because we don't have the time to sign hundreds of NDAs, and we're not interested in stealing people's ideas. We're interested in either investing in them or partnering with them, or if it's not for us, referring them on to someone else. Because if I can refer a deal to some other VC, it's going to come back to me in 6 months because I can get something out of it. So that's my take. Maybe you guys have.
Yeah, actually, even signing an NDA, good luck if you want to go in court against Sequoia. The opposite is also true. What is the guarantee of a VC when you put money that the entrepreneur is not going to run away with the cash, and good luck to found it? On a global level, I would say that it's really a question of where is the power. To make it simple, when you are looking for fund, from my perspective, the power is on that side of the table, because you have to convince this guy or similar guy to trust you, to inject money, to put their reputation, as you were saying, Isaac, and etc. But I think the key stuff is, once they put money in your baby, you get the power. Because my investor right now, for example, I have one in Switzerland, one in India, one in UK. Trust me, if I tell them now, okay, bye-bye, do it without me, you think they are going to come in Philippines to handle CashCashPinoy on a daily basis? No. I mean, once they put the money, in a way, they are trapped. They have to be sure that they didn't make a mistake. So what you were saying is, in fact, how you have the power, guys. So how can I be sure that you are not going to fool me? The truth, as Isaac was saying, is they don't have any interest.
I'm sorry, it's not about fooling. It's like
cheating, stealing, calling the way you want. But I'm just saying, at the end of the day, it's a question of balance of the power. They are as trapped as you are.
okay.
So they cannot screw you, because eventually it will be a backlash, as you were saying. And anyway, once they put the money, they really have to be sure that they didn't make a mistake with you.
Yeah, I think it comes down to what we said at the beginning, and ultimately the investment is in you and not in the idea. So that's really where the value is.
Okay, what are your requirements back here in the Philippines, though? Requirements to give money to people.
I'd say the same as anywhere else in the world. You're looking for a big enough market to sustain a big company. You're looking for a founder that's going to tenaciously fight to get his company to where it needs to go. And you're looking for a product that people are willing, product or service that people are willing to buy, that you can easily scale up.
Ours are a little different because of our investment model. So we're actually looking for people with some business experience, not necessarily in a startup, who want to work for a mix of salary and equity and have some domain expertise that's matched up to the businesses that we want to start. So our project in the Philippines and elsewhere is to pull people out of comfortable settings and get them working on startup ideas and incentivize them with a mix of some money and equity. So we have a different, slightly different criteria, but ultimately it's the same thing even as this. I'm going to look at this person and say, can you sell this product to whoever's going to buy it? Can you raise the next round of capital in front of investors? Can you see this project through all of the challenges that are going to come up because it's very, very difficult? And, ultimately, a bit of a judgment call when you meet these people, whether you think they have the fortitude and skill set to do it.
Okay.
At least
So I guess at the end of the day, well, Earl, before I...
really quickly, right? So the 3 values we're looking for in our founders is global ambition, speed of execution, and also frugality, right? We don't want people spending the money on just unnecessary things. So those are 3 things.
Just to be super precise, what do you need? You need an Excel file with your projection for the 3 coming years, your cash flow for the 3 coming years. You need a good deck who explain from A to Z everything, strength, weakness, good SWOT, the market, and everything. And you need an executive summary, which is 3 to 4 pages, who is an outlook of your global project. That's your mini kit. And if you have that, you can start to discuss. Without that, which is actually a very good thing, because by doing that, going back to your doctor project, by doing that, you will see if it's doable or no. You will probably raise some issue that you didn't think in the past. You will see just the money sense of that thing. Does it make sense or no? It will help you also to know how much, in fact, you need. I mean, 100 is enough, maybe too much, maybe you don't need money.
So I just want to add on the, I think that starter kit is powerful, but maybe more typical of your second round, like a real VC round. And I would say increasingly, at least for us, we will definitely have conversations off of a pitch deck and a lean canvas and a one-pager. We may go deeper and look for, but if you're funding at the idea stage or at the early traction stage, you may not need, full. So don't, like, what I would say is if you're going for your very, very first seed round, don't worry if you don't have your 3-year projections. Ultimately, you should have them, but if you don't, ultimately it's a sales pitch. So you have to.
So therefore, there's a contradicting here. He said, actually, you said a while ago it's the same, right? But you said no. You said
no.
3
Actually,
years and the other one
based
said
on my
no.
experience, when you discuss to investor, at least in Europe, they always ask me that type of
So
thing.
this is in Europe, not here then.
What?
I think I'm talking about the stage of investment more than the country. Like for very early stage, I think at least for us, we're not looking for the full. Like people used to write, what's your 20-page business plan and all of this stuff. We don't look for it as much. I'm more interested if you can describe your business on a lean canvas in 1 page that's compelling. I may push you for more information, but so I'm not saying his is not applicable. I'm just saying it's more typical of slightly later rounds when you've proven out a business model and have something that you can really tell a full story about. So yeah.
Just to add, I think it's almost flipped at this point, where if you're coming with a 20, 30-page business plan, all detailed, the question is almost raised, why did you spend all this time putting the business plan together as opposed to executing on your business? The caveat is that you're expected to know your business really well. So anything that would have gone into that business plan, you should know cold.
Yeah.
You should have talked to my guys. That's not what they asked me.
Okay.
So
Great.
I
Thank
guess
you,
as a
guys.
follow-on question, I mean, you guys have seen more than a few business plans. So based on what you've seen here in the Philippines, what's the most common missing item, if there's such a thing? What's been missing so far in what you've reviewed?
The biggest thing that I've seen missing, and this isn't just in the Philippines, but at the early stage stuff we look at, is a succinct and compelling understanding of the unit economics for the business. So it's actually pretty easy to spin out like, well, this year we're not going to make any money, but next year we're going to make some. And then in the 3rd and 4th year, we're really going to make a lot of money. like you could literally just exchange that slide in every single deck or whatever. Look, in the 4th year, like we're super profitable. But what often, and it just doesn't mean anything because you never know. What some people skip over is just a clear statement of it costs me this much to get a user, I make this much off of the user, and here's what the economics look like now, and if you gave me money and you can help me make it more efficient for this reason and that reason, then it becomes a profitable business model, and then I can scale it. So people try to tell the long story instead of the single user, how does this business function story, and that's the key, because it was like the very first slide, what is a startup? A startup is looking for a scalable and repeatable business model, and sometimes people don't tell a clear enough story about how this thing makes money, which always means you have a good that you sell more than it costs for you to produce, or a user that makes more than it costs for you to acquire. So that's often the missing piece in the pitches that we see.
Yeah, for me, it's product road. Where are they going to go from the time you invest? At the same time, the market roadmap, right? Are there certain cities first in Manila and then in Davao and then they go outside? Seems to start by only the next 3 months, right? So I always want to think about how do you think about it, because it tests the strategy, the strategic mind of the guy and where things are potentially going to go, and also their ambition. So to me, that's the big things that I don't see quite often.
Jack, I have a question. I'm just very curious about this. What's the exit strategy of most businesses you have funded maybe in the past that is really on deficit? Is there any idea on that?
I missed the last part of it.
What's the exit strategy for VCs who are involved with startups and maybe after short to medium term plan is on deficit status? What does it look like? What's the situation? Yeah, of course, it's losing money. So what's the exit strategy?
If you're losing money?
Yes. So how do you do it with the startup?
Find someone who won't look too closely at the books. Trade sale. Sell your stocks on the market, or become a profitable business that spins off dividends. I think that's the standard recipe. I think in the challenge for like doing investment in a market like the Philippines is that your trade sale options are a little bit limited if you're only focused on the Philippines, right? Because not that many people outside of the Philippines, even though yes, it's a hot market, but the big players, there's not so many people. I mean, big companies, MNCs, who go, oh, I really need a Philippines company to round out my portfolio. They may say, I need a Southeast Asia play to round out my portfolio. So trade sale is tough here because sometimes you just don't have enough acquirers, and therefore the amount that you can sell at is not so high because there's no bidding. If you go, oh, well, Smart and Globe are the only ones who could buy me, and Smart said they're not interested, so I've got one. So I think that's a challenge here, which you have to mitigate by finding traction in other markets, or selling at a lower valuation. If you see the sales in Singapore, where there have been some exits recently, but they're very small trade sales to Singaporean companies because they just haven't reached that multiple market presence. But the best way is just to become profitable, and then you don't have to sell to anybody, I guess.
Yeah, I think this is a great question because this is probably going to be the #1 obstacle in drawing sizable venture capital investment into the country, is the lack of liquidity options. And from the entrepreneur side, I would say, it holds even in markets there is liquidity. Build your company to be profitable. If you have a strong bet now, you will always be in a better position, either for an acquisition or for IPO or any of those exit venues.
Quick tip, make sure your potential acquirers make a list of maybe 5 of them, and always make sure you tell them what you're doing at any regular point of time. When I was in Cisco, these startups, they meet me every day, right? Well, different types of startups, but people meet me every day in the hopes of us acquiring them 2 years from now, right? So figure out who the top 5 potential acquirers, if not, you're not going to IPO, is, and then at least keep them warm, right? Maybe send them an email every 6 months, what's going on, etc. So that's just another tip for you.
Do the same for investors, by the way. If you're planning to raise money, start building the relationships early.
Any last remaining questions from the floor before we wrap up this panel? We have one very, very compelling panel left before we conclude the summit. Oh, there's no more questions from the floor, so I want to thank the four panelists, and a round of applause, please, for these four guys who took the time out to share their experiences in the Philippines.